Do you know what's black and white and black and white and black and white? A penguin rolling down a hill. Hey everybody, so today we're going to be making monochromatic art. Monochromatic art is art that only uses one color. But we are going to be doing this in several different values or levels of light and dark in order to make our artwork look more interesting. We're going to be doing this a couple of different ways. The first way is just our standard draw it out and color it. So let's look at our supplies. We're going to need something to draw on. I'm going to be using standard white paper, but you could also use lined paper, construction paper, whatever you've got. You're going to need something to make straight lines with. I'm going to be using a ruler, but again, you could use another sheet of paper. You could use some junk mail, anything that has a straight edge. You're going to need something to draw with. I'm going to be using a pencil, but you could use colored pencil, you could use a pen, whatever you have. You're probably going to need a couple of round objects to trace. Something like a cup or a bowl will work great. You could use a lid from a container if it's round, anything that's a circle. Finally, you're going to need something to color with. I'm going to be using one of these jumbo crayons, like this guy right here, but you could also use a colored pencil if that works better for you. You could use chalk, you could use oil pastels. I would avoid using markers because you're not going to get a whole lot of variation with that. You're not going to be able to get different levels of light and dark. It only pretty much comes out one color. So once you have all your supplies gathered, we can get started. Okay, so we're going to start this project by just drawing out our basic design. I'm going to be using some very basic shapes, but if you want to get more elaborate and add objects or animals or people, that's fine too. I'm going to start by taking one of my shapes and putting it on there, and I'm going to trace it out like this. Take my pencil around the edge. Remember to draw lightly. That way you can erase if you need to, if you don't like what you've done. Here we go. One circle. I'm going to take a smaller one. I'm going to do the same thing here. Get it placed. Pencil and paper and tracing around. Drawing lightly. There we go. There's two shapes. Alright, let's add some straight lines. I think let's make a triangle here between the two circles. You do not have to do a design exactly like mine. You can add whatever shapes or objects or patterns that you want to use in yours. That's cool. This is just an example. All right, and I think we need some. Some squares and rectangles in mine. So I'm gonna take my straight edge and put a line here. Maybe put a line here. The idea here is that we're going to be dividing up this paper so we could add lots of different values of our color. I'm going to be using blue, but whatever color you're going to pick, red, green, what have you. Let's put another line over here. And maybe we'll have some that don't go the whole length of the page. Let's try like here. Kind of just sectioning it off, making lots of little shapes that we can fill in. And then we need something up here. Let's see here. I think I'm going to make this line go all the way across. Just kind of making lots of tiny little shapes. That looks pretty good. We'll probably stop there. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is color this thing in. Now, because this is a monochromatic drawing, what we're going to want to do is pick one color, I'm going to be using blue. And we're going to make several different levels of blue. So we're going to have some really light blue, we're going to have some really dark blue, we're going to have some medium blue. It's going to be kind of, interesting and patchworky looking. So I think I'm going to start maybe like over here. Start coloring that in. You don't have to color every single space. You can leave some of them white because that is a tone of blue. You can make any color super, super light until it gets to the point that's white. It'll count. You also want to start with your lightest tones. You can always make them darker, but it's very hard to make them lighter. And I'm going to so I think I'm going to leave this guy here white, maybe this guy white. Let's color some of these others. We're just going to do this across the whole paper. In fact, okay, so as you can see, I've coated a lot of my shapes with a basic layer of light blue. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back over the parts we've already colored in some of them and make it a little darker to go for our medium blue value. So we're going to pick a few spots here and we're going to darken them up just a little bit. I think I'm going to start up here. I'm going to start coloring it in. A useful tip for coloring lightly is to hold your tool by the back end. You're going to hold it like it's a magic wand, like your Harry Potter casting a spell here. What it's going to do is it's going to keep you from putting too much pressure down here on the tip. If you're down here, there's a lot of temptation to bear down really hard. You're not going to be able to draw or color lightly. So if you hold it by the end, your pressure is a lot lighter. We're just going to darken up a few of these areas just a little bit to make a medium blue. Let's see here. Maybe darken up this guy slightly. Maybe the bottom section right here. Try to change it up a little bit. You don't want to have too many dark areas next to other dark areas. You want a good mix of dark. We're going to keep doing this across the whole artwork, just picking random spots and making them slightly darker, just like this. So as you can see, I have added in all of my medium blue tones over the top of some of the light tones on my image. The very last thing we need to do is to add our darkest blue tones, the really, really dark blue sections, the values that will make this image really, really pop. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start on the left. I'm just going to kind of work my way this way, adding in the dark blue. Once again, we're just going to pick some of those areas we had already colored medium blue, and we're going to darken those up. For this one, you can really bear down. Color heavy, because we want it nice and dark. This is really going to help everything stand out. It's going to look a lot more interesting. And there you have it, a monochromatic art piece. Now, the second option for doing this project is to paint it. And I'm going to be giving you several ways that you could do this at home. So let's take a look at our supplies. First things first, we're going to need paper, same as before. You generally want thicker paper. If it's really, really flimsy, it's probably going to fall apart when you get it wet. So, something fairly thick. Same as before, you're going to need a pencil so you can draw out your design. You're going to need straight edge and round objects to trace. And then we're going to get into how we're going to color it. Obviously, the best option would be to just use some paint. Just pick a color, water it down, paint with it. But if you don't have paint at your house, that's okay. There are other options. In fact, I'm going to be using coffee. Coffee is a fantastic paint. It works really, really great, especially when you're doing monochromatic art. But anything that makes a stain can be used as a paint. You could use Kool-Aid, you could use tea, you could use charcoal briquettes, whatever you've got. Food coloring is fantastic to use as paint. So anything that makes a stain will work. You're going to need some water, and you're going to need something to paint with. I'm going to be using a paintbrush, but if you don't have a paintbrush, that's okay. You could use a Q-tip. These work really, really great. You could have tried to do this with your finger. I'm not sure if finger painting will work with watercolor style. It's a little shaky, but give it a shot. Maybe you might come up with something cool. Who knows? So let's take a look at how to do that. Okay, so if you decide that you want to paint this project, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. First way is, of course, just use normal paint. If you're going to go this route, all you got to do is just add water to whichever color you're going to use and paint it on. It's pretty simple. However, if you don't have paint, you can make your own using stuff around the house. I'm going to be using this coffee here, but you could use tea, you could use food coloring, you could use charcoal, whatever you've got. Making paint out of this is pretty simple. Take the lid off, get a cup, get a spoon, and we're going to put a spoonful of coffee or tea or whatever in the cup. Put it back on. And we're going to add a little bit of water. We don't want to add a whole bunch because we want this to be fairly thick. If it's too watery, you're not going to get a very great color. It's just going to be too wimpy. So I'm going to mix in a little bit of water. You want it kind of syrupy. If you're making tea, you probably want to use a little bit of water when you put your tea bag in here. Kool-Aid, same thing, a little bit of water, a lot of Kool-Aid powder. Whatever you got. All right. We have paint. Now, just like if you were doing this with pencils or crayons or just drawing out your image, you're going to want to draw out your design, which I've already done here. And then you're going to want to start just filling this in with your lightest tones. Remember that you always want to work from light to dark. You can always make this darker, but you cannot make it lighter, especially with paint. It soaks into the paper, and whatever you put on there, you're stuck with. So we're going to start. I'm going to be using a paintbrush, but you can use Q-tip or maybe possibly a tissue or your finger. Try out some different stuff. I'm going to dip it in my paint. What I'm going to do is just start filling in areas, just like we did when we looked at drawing this project. We're going to fill it in with our lightest colors. Take your time. Try to stay clean. With watercolor especially, you want to work very, very slow and neatly because every single brush stroke is going to show up. Again, I'm not going to fill in every part of this project. I'm going to leave some of these spaces white, but we do want quite a few of these light tones because these are what we're going to use to make our medium tones and our dark tones. We're just going to continue on like this across the whole project, filling in the various bits that we want to be colored in. when you are done painting all of your light tones, it's very important that you stop and you let it dry. You cannot make it darker right yet because it's still very wet, and you can't really add water to water. It just makes a bigger puddle. It doesn't really get darker, it just gets whiter. So paint all your light tones, give it a few minutes, let it dry, then we'll come back and we'll do our medium tones. Okay, so it's been a few minutes and I've let this dry out a fair bit. You may notice that your paper will curl up slightly. That just happens when it gets wet. Once you're done with this project, you can, and let it dry, you can put it under something heavy like a book and flatten it back out. So the next thing we're going to do, now that we have all of our light tones in place, is we're going to start adding in our medium tones, our medium values. So we're going to dip our brush back in our paint, and we're going to start adding in some medium tones. So we're going to go back over the areas we already painted lightly, and we're going to darken them up just a little bit so they become medium. Once again, taking my time, working clean, make sure those edges are nice and neat, and we fill it in. Taking my time, working nice and neat, getting those edges. And of course, just like before, we are going to continue doing this across the whole project, picking those areas that we want to be medium and darkening them up just a little bit. And then once we do that, we're going to let it dry one more time so that we can make things super dark. Okay, so I've let this thing dry one last time and I'm ready to add my darkest tone. So we're going to go back into those areas that we painted medium, and we're going to pick a few of them and we're going to darken them up to a really super dark tone. Get those really dark values in there. Just picking a few random points. You don't need many of the super dark because, you know, it stands out just so much against all the other colors. And if you had too many of it, it would just be overload. So be selective. Pick a few. You don't have to go nuts with it. We're going to continue doing this across the whole paper, picking the spots we want to be dark. By the time we're done, we should have a finished artwork. And here you go. This is my finished coffee painting. So there you go. This is my artwork, but I want to see yours. Post a picture in our class art gallery.